Curaçao tem serai, assunto de Branspeito. Se aqui deve um caso, mas qualquer outro não. Mostrame de dede, com o pio vere. Tira falta de outro.
Curaçao, or Curaçao as the locals would call it, is a beautiful island within the Kingdom of the Netherlands. There are a vast array of people living on the island, and West African slave descendants make up the larger part of the population due to the island's involvement in the transatlantic slave trade. I traveled to the island to explore the transatlantic slave trade in the Caribbean and consequently unearthed Curaçao's African past. African slaves were brought to the island from West Africa, where the culture was rich and the kingdoms were thriving. I went to the Museum of Curaçao to dig into Curaçao's African past and understand the continent before the transatlantic slave trade. Africa. It is the cradle of humanity and the start of civilization. This is where it all began. Math, science, language, religion. It all started here on this magnificent continent. West Africa had several kingdoms like Ashanti, Songhai, and Mali, just to name a few, all possessing great power, organization, and art. The transatlantic slave trade had a detrimental effect on the West African civilizations. Despite the harm it brought to the continent of Africa, it made great profit for the European superpowers. Curaçao was an active slave trading center. The enslaved were sold throughout the Caribbean and within the island of Curaçao.
Slavery started in 1654 when Curaçao became a slave deposit of the Dutch. They had so many different forts at the western part of Africa, and they had to sell those to the different islands of the Caribbean. So, because they had all these people that they wanted to sell, they needed a place as a focal point from where they would sell the enslaved people, and that became Curaçao.
Naturally, the enslaved Africans were discontented with their lives on the island of Curaçao, causing one of the largest slave revolts of the Caribbean. The revolt was led by an enslaved African man named Tula. In a series of 5 fierce battles, Tula and his army fought bravely against the Dutch army. I went to the Museum of Tula and spoke with museum tour guide Mildred Rafala for an in-depth look at the Tula revolt.
Tula said to his master, "We are treated like animals. So there are better treatment for animals than for the people, than for the human being." And that was something that got them to start for the revolution for freedom. Around 300 slaves that has joined the revolution that day. The only thing they have to battle with was wood and stone.
This statue marks the place where each battle occurred on the island. Sadly, Tula was betrayed by a fellow slave.
And the 28th of September, they have kept Tula, because that was the idea. Because they think if they take the leader, everything is over. September, they bring them to jail in the governor, where in the governor we call it now the governor place. There at 40, we call it. There they take them to jail till 3 of October. It was 29 persons that they have killed at a very cruel manner.
Here is after the rebellion of Tula and the other slaves. They were fighting for their freedom, and they captured them, and here in front of Fort Amsterdam, they cut the head off. And after that, they went to Reef. They dropped the body over there, and they put the head hanging. When the boats coming with the new slaves, on Curaçao, the other one can see the hat hanging over there and they get scared.
The descendants of the enslaved Africans are huge contributors to Curaçao's current culture. Traces of West African dialect can actually be found in the country's native language, Papiamento.
Because the Papiamento language is started as a lingua franca, African Portuguese, and so it went to the colony, and here it got like 30% of the Dutch in it, and later on the Latin American influence, but the core of the language is African Portuguese.
Despite the richness of the African ancestry on the island, it is oftentimes denied or rejected.
Even having all these different aspects of Africanism in our culture and history, still there are many people ignorant about it. They do it as part of the Curaçao tradition without knowing the root of it. And it has to do with the way, the colonized way that we have, that we learn about ourselves and our identity. They are still ashamed of that truth, denying or just doing as if it is not there, your African root, not wanting to know anything about slavery and the slavery past, total denial on that aspect.
The hatred and denial of blackness crosses country lines and extends throughout the entire world. To reverse this curse of white supremacy, people of the African diaspora must seek out knowledge of themselves and their great past.
Internationally, it is very important that we show our strength. How can we show it? For instance, through conferences, through using the media more effectively about telling who we are. Very important in this aspect are the documentaries that we create and the movies that we make. We have to do it ourselves. We have to create the picture, the image of who we are. And very importantly, that globally we have to buy from our own people. If we can do that agenda, then the sky is the limit.
Reporting for allblackeverythingblog.wordpress.com, I am Dominique Spooner.